right, hi everybody. I'm Michael. I'm a developer for a small startup called Accepton. In my spare time, I help maintain a Ruby library. And every now and then I get some feature requests that make me scratch my head. This is from one of my co-maintainers, Gregory. He's a really smart guy. And he said, I want the syntax to look like this. So isn't this a syntax error? Include persistable new.
No. Persistable is a subclass of module.
It is in fact a syntax error.
Oh, I overshot.
You overshot. Well, it's sort of a syntax error. You know, we have an initialize method. Well, initialize isn't actually called for module new. If we actually make this a class method new, hey, it suddenly works. So we want to build modules dynamically with behavior specified in a constructor, and figured out how to do that. So what can we do with this? So I'm talking about building dynamic Ruby modules on the fly, and how I'm going to turn this into a gem based on me working on another gem. So module creation, this is just a little snapshot of what I wanted to do here. The idea here is the gem is hashy. If you've never used it, it's extensions for hashes that make them a lot more useful and a lot more slower, but a lot more powerful. And somebody wanted to be able to persist these easily to files. I wanted to make it so you could not only persist it to files, but persist it to databases, to whatever you really want it to, as long as you make an adapter. So in order to do that in a way that is actually usable, I needed to figure out how to do this. This is the basic idea. Having the new method take some parameters with some defaults, and then this is Ruby after all. Let's make let's not do everything in a method. Let's have a builder object that actually creates it. So this is the pattern that I'm using. Have a builder that actually creates a module that is assigned to an instance variable. I wanted it to be easy to use with the defaults, so you can actually do this easily by using the included hook. If you've never used the included hook, if you do on a module, you do self.included. That is called whenever you include a module into a class or another module. So you can do on-the-fly configuration there. So basically, I send the module the new method and create the base module with the defaults and include it when you actually just do the include persistable. So that's these two classes behave the same. They both use the defaults, which is using JSON or using JSON as the serialization method. So basic implementation of what the builder does. We needed to be able to pass in an adapter type. The adapter type is a symbol, and the persist method, they wanted to be able to customize the method that you call to persist it to the file. Because this is a generic hash library, we have a lot of collisions with methods. People want to have a hash that has a key of method that then you use a method accessor to access the key of method. So you do like hash.method, and there's a collision there because method is a core Ruby method. How many times can I say method in one sentence? So we needed to be able to customize the method that you use to actually persist it, and then if you wanted to build onto another module, just pass in the module that you want to use as the base as another instance variable. And then I have a couple little hooks here that just get called at the end of initialize. So add adapter. Basically just includes a module that is dynamically looked up from the registry. In the persistable module, I have a registered adapter method that basically looks at a hash and registers a symbol to a class or an instance of a class to instantiate as the adapter for saving it. So pretty simple there. Add persist method is just including the module that has the persistence logic that uses the adapter. So this is basically a method that delegates to the adapter that conforms to a spec. That's not really relevant for this presentation. And then overriding the persist method, I'm aliasing the method that gets included by persistable and then undefining it. So the persist method doesn't exist anymore and the alias only exists. So 3 little hooks that add some behavior. What does this generically do that would be useful outside of this context? I find myself asking this because I want to be one of those guys that you see everywhere in the Ruby ecosystem. I like Tenderlove or any of the Rails core contributors. So I try to think of how I can come up with gems, and I ask myself this question. I'm not particularly good at it, but I figured this is a good example of what I think about when I'm doing stuff like this. So one of the things that is generically useful outside of this when you're building a module is the idea of a stateless hook. In this case, the add persist method that I wrote is a stateless hook. All it does is it includes another module in the module that you're building. So how could we do this generically so we can make it easy to extend? If you're following the good object-oriented design principle, you want to be open for extension. So how can we make this open for extension? We can abstract this and have an add included hook that gets called at the end of the initialize method in the base class. And all it'll do is iterate through an array of inclusions and include the inclusions in the module. So if we were going to do this persistable builder off of this builder base class that we're hypothesizing, the only thing that we would have to do is add the persistable persistence module in the inclusions array, and then when you build a module, the builder will automatically include that in the module that you're building. Stateful hooks. The override persist method and the add adapter methods, they were stateful, if you remember. They were looking at the configuration that you passed into the builder and doing behavior based on that. So it's based on the state of the builder. So that looked different on my screen. I needed a way to do that, and I don't know how to change the size, but so I thought, well, I could do the same sort of pattern, only instead of doing the including modules, just send a message to the builder. So in this case, we have an array of hooks, and then add defined hooks will get called at the end of the initializer, and send each hook. I have a syntax error there. That shouldn't be symbol hook, that should be hook. So it gets sent, in this case, it'll get sent the add adapter message, which is defined, and the override persist method, which is defined. So it iterates through all the methods that you get passed in and dynamically does that behavior. So you can build with state. Things that I haven't got to yet that I'd like to do, I'd like to have a module that you can actually include in another module to say, hey, you can build this module with some configuration. So my idea is having a buildable module that will have a class method of builder. So you can actually specify the builder that's going to be used, and then when you include the buildable module in the class, you get the new method for free, and then the state will be persisted. In this case, I'm passing a pet peeve hash, and then this is one of the weirder parts of doing this. When you're building a module dynamically, and you look at your ancestor chain, if you're debugging for some reason, you're going to have this nameless anonymous module in your class. So if you've never inspected a class ancestry before, what you're looking at here is the first thing is the class that the item actually is, and then it's the list of all the modules and or superclasses of that object. There's
it's the objects in which the method will be sent. So like
yeah.
Method resolution, it'll list out everything that it's intended to pass the message to.
Yeah, so when you're doing the passing the message, it checks to see, does unconfigured persistable hash respond to this method? If it doesn't, it percolates up until it hits object unless you're, for some reason, subclassing base object. So it looks a little funny if you're debugging this. There is ways to set the module name in there that I'm going to look into, but just a little debugging thing that I'm kind of interested in. So that's basically what I've got done and mapped out so far. I'm still working out on the details of what I want to include. And I have a question for you. Is there anything that you've done lately at work or in your spare time writing code that you could extract out into a gem that would be useful for anybody else in the world? It's just something to think about. So, credits Gregory's little syntax suggestion got me sent down this rabbit hole of how the heck do I include something .new. And then I actually got the idea of how to actually do this from Peter Solnica's Virtus gem, which if you've never used it before is awesome for adding attributes to any plain old Ruby object. He does a lot of metaprogramming in there that is really interesting to look at, so I recommend checking that out. I rambled a bit, so if you want to see this, if you want to go over the slides later, you can just look me up on GitHub. This will be the module presentation repo. Once I get this extracted from my Hashi pull request, I'm going to release it, probably just name it Module Builder because I'm not good at naming things. So, and there's my contact info if you want to talk. So, I know I went through pretty quick. Any questions or Carl?
Is part of this implementation in Hashi now?
It's not. I haven't submitted the pull request because I still need to clean it up a bit. I have actually pushed the branch to my GitHub GitHub fork of Hashi. If you want to look it up, it's the persistence framework branch, and you can look at the actual implementation, which a lot of it was actually on the slides. So.
And so does the module builder exist yet, or not?
I haven't pushed this yet because I haven't actually extracted it yet, but I'll update the group when I push it.
Push an empty repo to the gem name.
Fair enough. Squatting. I don't like squatters on names. It's yeah, I do too. I don't remember what it was, but about a year ago I came up with a really good name for something, and I went and looked, and there's actually a gem that has that name with a 0.0.0 version and no code ever written. So, Alec?
I have a slight technical question, so I'm sorry. I noticed that you have a module and you're defining a new method on it. Have you considered subclassing? So instead of having my module builder be a module, have you considered making it a class that inherits from module?
The one that returns a module at the end, right?
Well, or a subclass of module.
Well,
Return a module, return a subclass.
The problem is that when you call new on a class, it returns an instance of that class. You cannot force it
but I'm
to.
saying your class would subclass module. So an instance of your class would be a module by definition.
I thought about that. I don't remember why I didn't go that route.
Because extending built-in objects is generally dangerous. And that's
yeah.
one of the most dangerous built-in objects to extend.
It could be that. I like the object-oriented approach, so I wanted an actual builder that does the building.
Okay.
So that's why I went this route. I did try that.
A new method, and I was like, this feels like a class. It returns a module. So
yeah, but you're newing up a module. You're not newing up a class. I think the syntax request was basically, hey, let's make this feel like the rest of Ruby. Except it doesn't feel like the rest of Ruby because you don't ever call new on something that you're including. So I don't know. I don't know what the best actual way to do it would be. Like the way that Virtus does it, he actually does, instead of including like Virtus : model to include the model attribute DSL in your class, you include Virtus .model. So the .model is basically my .new method that is then built. So I don't know. You could actually, one of the other suggestions for syntax would be to do like persistable bracket symbol JSON bracket, or I think, I forget the name of it. There's a gem that does that style. There's a lot of different ways to do this. As long as you return a module from that model from that method, you just can't have it be a class that does that. So.
Unless the class was a subclass of the module.
I don't know. I honestly don't.
Return value would be a module. It would be a type of module.
Well, because model.new is C. There is no Ruby for that. All it does is it allocs it and it.
Well, class.new. Class.new.
Yeah, and class.new and yeah, is also C. So I don't know. Adventures in pseudo meta sort of programming. So.
Any other questions for Michael? All right, give it up for Michael.